Welcome back, everybody, to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Josh Taylor here with you on a day full of college football. Talked about Pitt losing to Miami today. Penn State wins today. Want to also mention Duquesne beats Towson 31-10 in the FCS playoffs, so the Dukes advance. They will face South Dakota State next week. Slippery Rock in the D2 playoffs as well. So a lot of college football running around today on the schedule. So wanted to make those mentions of those. We talked about high school football as well. We got some phone lines lighting up, 412-575-2600. We have Robert on Twitter. It says, I think it looks grim for Pitt against Clemson. No passing, no running game, and this opponent is better than Miami. I think, Robert, honestly, losing Jimmy Morrissey on the offensive line, that's a unit that really had been a lot of the forefront of how this running game had worked out for Pitt. And I really believe that a lot of Pitt's success centers around its running game, centers around its offensive line, and the run being able to set up the pass. I think that's what turns Pitt into a ball control offense. I think that's what allowed them to be so successful over these past several weeks of the season. So with that injury, losing your man in the middle does hurt them quite a bit. And Clemson is a team that looks like it is just running through everybody. They're giving South Carolina all they can handle right now. And Clemson's been that good all season long. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Al in Bethel Park. Al, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hey, Josh. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Josh, hear me out. I got to say this.
Let's go.
I called Bob Pompiani about a week ago, and I mentioned Robert Morris, that there's always outside influences when it comes to certain things. And I mentioned Robert Morris a couple of years ago against Villanova, and I told him, be careful about certain calls because the committee does not want Northwestern to win and doesn't want Pitt to win. And it came true last night in the West Virginia game with that a call against the West Virginia receiver. If you watch that official, he's supposed to watch the receiver step out of bounds. Instead, he watched the receiver block that guy out of bounds. And like the announcer said, he has never seen that call made in all the years he's been calling that game. And if I'm Pitt and I'm Northwestern, if the game is close, don't be surprised, because you know the Fiesta Bowl and the Rose Bowl don't want a 5-win team and a 4-win team in their games. And Bob dismissed me like I'm crazy, but last night, you tell me when you've seen that call been made in all the years you've been watching football.
Never.
It's never been called. And you watch that referee.
I've never heard it.
He never would watch that receiver block. He's supposed to watch the receiver step out of bounds, the running back. Instead, all of a sudden, he's going to watch that guy block him out of bounds. Come on, Josh.
Okay, it's a 25-minute show. You made your point. I agree with you. That's a call I have never seen called before, and it seemed like an absolutely inopportune time. West Virginia had a couple calls that went against them in critical points of the game, and Dana Holgorsen did not hold his tongue about that, saying pretty much, I have no idea why that would happen, and pretty much saying if you don't agree with me, I don't care, because that's just insane. I think the word he used was improbable, how it just made absolutely no sense to make that call. And I agree with you. I agree with you to the extent of a call like that at that point of the game. I talked about this earlier in the day on 93.7 The Fan. It used to be in football games, when games were that tight, when it got to critical parts of the game, the referees didn't call penalties as much. It used to be that the penalties were called more infrequently because it was more of the mindset of letting the players dictate the outcome of the game. That ended up being a problem because think about what happened after that penalty. West Virginia would have been set up on the 2-yard line. Instead, they don't actually get as far as they need to. I think it set up the fumble that Oklahoma took back the other way, if I'm remembering the sequence right. So that call definitely doomed West Virginia. So that's one of those things that goes against them. I don't know why they made that call. I don't know why that rule is becoming a thing that you enforce now. It just seemed really egregious to call it at that time. I will say this much. When you're talking about games that are that close, remember what Jimmy Johnson said when Miami lost Notre Dame on a bad call? I think it was in late 80s, early 90s. He said, and I remember this very distinctly, you have to put yourself in a situation where the referees can't dictate the outcome for you. If you put yourself in a better position during the game, the referees can't win the game for the other team or lose it for you. That was one of those positions where West Virginia had other opportunities. I'm not saying that the call wasn't unfair, because it was. But it comes back to what Jimmy Johnson said years ago. You got to put yourself in a position where the referees can't win or lose the game for you. Let's go to Dan in Uniontown. Dan, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for calling in.
Hey, Josh, I want to talk about the Penguin goaltending.
Okay.
I really believe they need to stick with these two young guys, the Smith and Jari, and seek trades for Murray. What I've heard was Murray hasn't been really taking responsibility for the way the Penguins are playing, blaming the people in front of him. I also heard it's in practice too. He got in Sullivan's doghouse, and I think he's getting to be a cancer on the team. The Penguins front office needs to admit they made a mistake on Murray and the Fleury deal. But I think these two young goaltenders here could take the Penguins far. And I just think Murray's more of a cancer on the team now than a asset.
Thanks for the call. Two things. One, I like the fact that Casey DeSmith has played as well. Stopped 37 shots again tonight. Outstanding job by Casey DeSmith. I'd never take anything away from the opportunities that he's gotten. Tristan Jarry, I thought played well last night against Boston. I think it's clear. These are two guys that are both extremely confident right now and are both very sound in what they're doing. I'd never take that away from them. With that said, this probably couldn't be better timing for Matt Murray to probably step aside. I think there are some things at play. I don't think all of them are hockey related. I think some of them are confidence related. I think some of them may be personal with him. Now, as far as what you've heard and as far as what you've been told, I will say this much. If there is a sentiment that the guys in front of him maybe have not done that great of a job, he may not necessarily be wrong about that, but there's a difference between feeling something and saying something, right? If he's feeling that way, probably warranted. If it's been said out loud, obviously creates a different dynamic. But I will say this. If he does feel that way, he's justified in feeling that way because this defense has had its issues. It's had its issues as far as being able to contain teams. I know there's been a lot of debate about Jack Johnson and what he has or has not done. I was of the belief when Justin Schultz went out with an injury, I felt like that was going to affect them offensively and it was going to affect them defensively because besides being the next best guy besides Chris Letang on the power play, some might argue he's just as good, if not better. That's another discussion for another time. But as good as he is on the power play, as much of an impact as he has offensively, and as solid as he can be defensively, as far as not making those bad plays and not making the stupid mistakes, Justin Schultz is one of their most consistent guys as far as that defensive core. So that's a guy that they miss. So as far as all of that, yeah, I think some of that is true. But to put all of it on Matt Murray, I don't think is fair. Yes, DeSmith has been good. Jari, I think, can do well in the opportunity that he's given. But to put all of it on Matt Murray, I don't think that's fair to him. And I think that's definitely not fair considering the fact that his teammates have not been 100% stellar in front of him. Got to take a break. More calls and more tweets when we come back. Stick around.